On the very edge of Route 44, where the reach of human civilization finally snaps, a massive cage of steel stood frozen in the dark. It was Jonathan Jones's 18-wheeler. The engine was rattling in an irregular, dying rhythm, like a beast gasping for its final breath. The headlights pierced the fog-thick mouth of the forest with a surgical pale light sharp enough to cut the air. But the driver's seat was empty, stripped of its occupant, staring back with hollow indifference. The door swung wide, as if the driver had been beckoned by a silent command, or lured by a presence invisible to the human eye. What was most chilling was the absence of any struggle. No jagged scratches on the metal, no frantic scuff marks on the road. Instead, the interior was unsettlingly orderly. On the dashboard, Jonathan had placed a photograph of his daughter, the person he cherished most, and his worn wedding ring, which he had never taken off in 20 years. They were laid out with mathematical precision, as if he were performing a final ritual, neatly severing every tie to this world before crossing into another. When investigators stepped into the cab, they were met with a sensory nightmare. Despite the pristine condition of the truck, an atmosphere of intense wrongness filled the space. There was a stench, a putrid, cloying odour of dozens of animals rotting alive. A scent of ancient death that seemed to have soaked into the very marrow of the seats. And there, on the floorboards, were Jonathan's old boots and socks, placed side by side, as if waiting to be stepped back into. In the sub-zero bite of a 10-degree frost, Jonathan had stripped away his only protection and walked into the abyss of the woods. Barefoot. The footprints left behind were steady, no hesitation, no fear, just the deliberate, rhythmic pace of a man led by a gargantuan, invisible will toward his own destruction. A witness who happened to pass that lonely stretch of road that night swears they will never forget Jonathan's final moments. He was following a faint, ethereal blue light pulsing from behind the truck, a colour that does not exist in the human vocabulary. The massive trees seemed to ripple, reaching out their branches like longing arms to welcome him home. The witness's voice still trembles with terror decades later. Jonathan's bare feet were being shredded by frozen stones and jagged briars, leaving a trail of dark arterial blood in the snow that looked almost black under the moonlight. But he felt no pain. He looked enlightened. He was smiling with a radiant, terrifying joy, his mouth open as if witnessing the very gates of a twisted paradise. Humming a melody of haunting beauty, he dissolved into the shadows, stepping as if he were finally returning to the place where he truly belonged. When the search party was finally deployed, the forest was unnervingly silent. No bird song, no insect hum, just a vacuum of sound where the searchers' radios screamed with a sharp, piercing static. 1, 2, 39. Almost 40. The voice on the other end wasn't Jonathan's, nor was it human. It was a wet, rhythmic frequency, like tens of thousands of damp leaves rubbing together in a synchronized whisper. Then they found the decorations, scraps of old shirts, torn hats and dolls woven intricately from actual human hair hung from the branches, swaying in a forest where there was no wind. They weren't just lost items, they were trophies, curated by the forest after every successful hunt, used as lures for the next soul brave enough to enter. On the fourth day of the search, the team finally reached the forbidden sanctuary at the forest's dark heart. The landscape was a vision of a hell that even God forgot to curate. The trees were grotesquely twisted, strangling one another in a silent struggle, their bark etched with the unmistakable shapes of human faces frozen in mid-scream. Every knot in the wood was a living eye, tracking the searchers' movements with a cold, predatory intent. Stone cairns were piled with impossible precision across the floor, and in the crevices of those stones, searchers found bleached human teeth and sharp fingernails packed together like a macabre mosaic. It wasn't just a clearing. It was a dining table where the forest displayed what it couldn't digest, says the sole surviving searcher, now confined to a psychiatric ward. At night, the trees began to whisper warmly in my ear, "This is your bed. Your skin will soon become a hard, beautiful shell." My partner suddenly began clawing at his own skin, laughing with an ecstatic madness, claiming he wanted to join the grain. When I saw roots erupting from his fingertips, burrowing into the frozen earth, I lost my mind and ran. His partner never screamed. His voice simply dissolved into the rustle of leaves, and within minutes, his body became part of a towering, ancient oak. The forest was expanding its territory, using living human flesh as the raw material for its bark and branches. His eyes became the knots in the wood, destined to watch the forest forever. No physical trace of Jonathan Jones was ever found on the surface again, but 1 year later, miles from where his truck had stopped, his military dog tag was found. The chilling part? It wasn't found lying on the ground. It was found deep inside the very heart of a living oak, grown into the wood's rings as if it were part of the tree's own biological history. The forest hadn't just killed Jonathan. It had absorbed his very information, his every cell, weaving him into its vast, sentient neural network. Even now, near those woods, people report hearing the sound of a truck horn in the dead of night. It's a perfect mimicry, a lure used by the forest to entice the next lost soul. If you hear a familiar voice in the woods, or if the soil beneath your feet feels as warm and soft as human skin, it's already too late. The forest is never in a hurry. It waits in the shadows, stretching its limbs to hook your soul while you are paralyzed by a mix of horror and grace. Like Jonathan, you too will become the fertilizer, the very fiber that makes the forest grow greener. Now, look slowly out your window. Do the trees seem to be leaning just a little closer to you tonight? Can't you hear them whispering your name?